You're listening to 99.1 WQRT-LP, and welcome to Radio Free Book Club for August 2025. I'm Ken Honeywell. I'm a writer and reader from Indianapolis, and this month we're traveling back in time and across to an alternate America where, following some domestic terror activities committed by men of Vietnamese descent, Vietnamese Americans are gathered up in domestic concentration camps, not unlike what happened to more than 100,000 Japanese Americans in World War II. The book is Me Documents. It looks like My Documents, but with the diacritical mark over the Y. My becomes Me, which is Vietnamese for America. It's the second novel by Kevin Nguyen. He is a features editor at The Verge and former senior editor at GQ. He's edited stories that have been finalists for the National Magazine Award and the Pulitzer Prize. Nguyen's first novel, New Waves, was published in March of 2020, named one of the best books of the year by NPR, the New York Public Library, and others. Me Documents is part comedy, part cautionary tale. I think we'll have a lot to talk about. So thank goodness we have some excellent talkers joining us in the Radio Free Book Club Clubhouse today. All are book club veterans, and I'd love for them to introduce themselves now, starting with Tim Taylor. Hi, Tim.
Hi, Ken. It's good to be here. I am a longtime reader and fan of reviews of intellect and fun, and I think this kind of combines both of it. I'm glad to be here. I do a small bit of writing myself and a small bit of producing and other things, and otherwise I chase after my grandkids. Here I am.
Yeah, glad to have you, Tim. And Tim will have a poem in this year's Vonnegut Library Journal, which is awesome.
Sharing the honor with Mr. Ken, of course.
Yeah, I do too. But Tim's I knew was going to be in there the minute I saw it. So congratulations, Tim. That's excellent.
That's good.
Christine.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Hudson. Also a reader and writer in Indianapolis. Happy to say that I've been able to put a lot more time into writing lately for the first time in years, which is life-giving. It's so much better than working a 9-to-5 in marketing. No shade to marketing. So yeah, super excited to be back to talk about this book.
Yeah, excellent. Glad you're here. And Steve Woods, hello.
Ken, hello. Steve Woods, I would say maybe voracious reader and a very frustrated writer. And this is maybe my 6th or 7th time on the show. So yeah. I'm glad, although it's a lot of pressure, and I hope you'll have me back.
Yeah, we'll see, Steve. We'll see after this show. But actually, Steve was the first person I asked to be on this show when we were having lunch about 3 years ago. So yeah, glad you're still here. And awesome. Steve is an NFL official. It's his part-time job. Football season's coming up, Steve.
Right around the corner.
Yeah. What's the biggest new rule change you got to deal with this year?
If the kicking team kicks it into the end zone, it's going to go to the 35 this year instead of the 30. So they want to promote more run backs.
All right.
Interesting.
Yeah, very interesting.
Something to watch for.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks for the heads up. And now, before we go off to this alternate universe, let's remind you that there is a lot to spoil in Me Documents. We'll be spoiling it early and often, so if you're planning to read it, unless you're the sort of person who doesn't mind knowing what happens before you read the book, you might want to come back and listen at another time, which is easy to do because you can find this and all the episodes of Radio Free Book Club on Spotify, Apple, just about anywhere you stream podcasts. We also hope you'll subscribe to our Radio Free Book Club Substack for non-spoiler notes about the book, including whether or not we would recommend it. So, yeah, let's start talking about this. Christine, we always rely on you for a quick summary.
Yes.
Can you give us just a quick what's the book about?
I can. I feel like I always mean to do a quick summary and then I ramble and talk forever. So I'll try to actually keep it short. So this book is about the lives of 4 Vietnamese Americans who we learn a little bit about their background and sort of their origin and how they came to live in the United States. But they're living in the U.S. when there's a series of terrorist attacks, pretty major terrorist attacks. I think the largest acts of domestic terrorism in recent years are carried out And the government decides, great, let's just detain everyone who's Vietnamese, because that seems fair and logical. So half of the characters are sent to detention camps out in, is it California?
California.
Out in California, in a town ironically named Independence, or Independence City, something to that effect. So the story sort of follows the lives of Jen, Duncan, and their mother, who are in these detention camps. And then it also follows Ursula and Alvin, who received exemptions from this detention camp, partially because of work, but there might be something else at play. I feel like that's never really said.
Partially because they're also half Vietnamese.
They can pass as, exactly,
Right.
yeah, especially in Ursula's case, who can pass as white. So it sort of follows the lives of all four of these characters, specifically Jen and Ursula, who have a lot of overlap because Jen is Ursula's news source for her quote-unquote reporting at Top Story News, or I think that's what it's called. So yeah, follows all four characters, and especially with the focus on Ursula and Jen's interactions.
And they are actually siblings. They're
Yes.
actually
Oh,
half
yes,
siblings,
yeah.
even though they call each other cousins just because it's
yeah.
easier. They all had the same father.
Yes, and he's involved in the story as well.
He is. Well, thank you, Christine.
Yeah.
So let's talk about general impressions first. Tim, what'd you think about the book? What worked for you? What didn't work for you?
It was fascinating. I think my first comment on it is America loves a good story. And a lot of what goes on here is about stories being told, and which stories are getting told and which ones aren't, and which ones are received and which ones
And
aren't.
who's telling them?
And who's telling them. And so from the very beginning, I think early on, the pattern is set that there's an appetite for stories that may or may not be true, and which starts with Ursula's retelling of her mother's story, which she uses to great effect in school and whatnot when she needs a good story to tell in a particular class or something like that. And then you find out, whoops, it's not exactly the way it was told to her, but yet it was very, very effective. And that, to me, kind of sets up the pattern for the whole book. And then it also, I think, has some huge racial overtones when you have a woman who is a light-skinned American who is actually Vietnamese descent as well, who, in my opinion, is greatly taking advantage of her cousin, who is full-blood Vietnamese and therefore much more easily segregated.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit. Steve, what'd you think?
I liked it. One of I think the litmus test is if this stays with you long after, and I think I'm on my fourth book since I read this, and there are still parts that I would go back and think about where I just hate Ursula. And so that's, I think that's demonstrates Nguyen's ability to create characters that you care about in one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
The internment was unfortunately not much of a stretch for me. Like I bought into that immediately, just kind of given where we're at. And I think the last time I was here, we read Prophet Song, which there were echoes of the same kind of storylines in there. But this stuck with me, and I've continued to come back and think about it.
Yeah, I want to talk about that Prophet Song connection also in a little bit. I thought that was really interesting. That occurred to me as well. What'd you think, Christine?
Yeah, I honestly really liked this. I think the part of it that worked the best for me is the multiple character and multiple points of view. Even though it was still sort of a third-person close point of view, I like that we shifted focus between the different characters.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always a big fan of a book that doesn't necessarily have one protagonist per se or one antagonist, and especially when the antagonists, like the ODC guard we met, Hugo, who was like, I don't know, a job's a job. If you try to stand for everything right in this world, it'll drive you crazy. So even like the ODC guards being humanized was still really interesting to me, even though the camps are clearly terrible. When you zoom in enough, you can sort of see facets of everything. So really big fan of all the characters. Even Steve and I were talking about this. Even though I hated Ursula, I still was the most excited to read her sections of this book because I just didn't know what was going to happen next.
I agree.
Who will she exploit next? Who else will she throw under the bus?
Yeah,
And what else will
interesting.
she gain from it?
Yeah.
And why is she drinking so much? Is it the guilt? I feel like I wanted to drink.
I didn't pick that up, but yeah.
She drinks like a bottle of wine per page.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, all good stuff to talk about. I want to kind of go back though to Tim, to your point about that first chapter,
Right.
kind of setting the tone for the whole book. There were so many things that happened in that chapter that were echoed throughout the book.
Absolutely.
And to set the scene a little bit, it is set in Vietnam, right after the fall of Saigon, and the matriarch of this family is trying to get out of Vietnam, trying to figure out how to do it. She sends a couple of her kids off and then brings another one with her. But the story that everyone was told was that her husband just missed the boat. He didn't actually just miss the boat. She just got away. And Steve, that to me is where this whole thought about Prophet Song came in. Was in that book, a lot of that book was about staying too long when bad stuff is happening and not getting away. And in this one, it was very much, there were a couple of characters, including that grandmother, Ba Noi, and the kid, everybody's father, Dan, who just took it upon themselves to just take off without much warning or apology or comment to anyone. Is that the parallel you saw?
Yeah, the the ability to recognize peril and get away. So that was one of the things that they talked about in Prophet Song, and I think those people are often looked at as kind of over reacting, right? And then hindsight says that they were actually very wise to do that. The grandmother pulling up stakes and heading to America kind of at whatever cost, kind of rang true with that. And the strength that she demonstrated to leave her life behind and her husband, which you didn't really get a sense. I mean, he didn't seem like the best, but, family, you got to circle the wagons, and he was not in that circle.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
I'm not sure she wanted him in the
Yeah.
wagon.
yeah. And her favorite movie was Babe, Pig in the Woods, which I thought was really,
So random.
yeah,
Yeah.
But
It made me want to watch the movie, though, honestly.
yeah. Have you
Yeah.
ever seen it?
I mean, probably when I was a kid.
Yeah,
Right? But
me
it's
too.
probably been
Whenever it
30
came
years.
out, I probably
Yeah.
saw it in the theater.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that whole idea of the pig having to go to the city to save the farm,
Yeah.
yeah, interesting that was her favorite
Mhm.
movie. So, Me Documents is set in a recent past, alternate America. If my timeline is figuring right, John McCain was still around and
yeah.
was driving this Vietnamese detention, seemingly. Is that, how realistic was this to you all? Is this something that could have happened, could happen? Can you see this sort of thing happening?
I think it unfortunately feels incredibly plausible and realistic. Like, I think this could be historical fiction at this point. Like, it feels like
I
it is.
kind of took it as that.
Yes,
Really.
yeah.
It felt very real to me in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciated, like, I was so nervous to read this when I first read the flap cover. I was like, great, this is going to be difficult, miserable, exhausting, sad. This is our reality. And so I appreciated the comedic undertones, like the summary said it was funny, and I was like, how in the world could this be funny? But it did have a lot of comedy, like low key, sort of baked in between the lines. And I think peak comedy was, I think, well, we might talk about this later, but Tom's play, I thought
Right.
was, I didn't want to laugh at him, but I was like, this is, especially right at the end of the book, after all that we've been through with these characters, I thought Tom's play was the perfect sort of pacing for a breath of air at the resolution and sort of after the climax of the story.
Yeah, I want to talk about that
Yeah.
a little more in a bit as well. What do you think, Steve? Was this plausible to you?
Unfortunately, it was. I did get hung up on the McCain stuff. Like I want to think that he wouldn't have reacted like that, but given the circumstances of what he endured, you could see that he would probably, or it's plausible that he could react in such a way. I'm sure his family took exception to that when this came out, but yeah, unfortunately, there wouldn't have to be too many dominoes that would fall until something like this could potentially happen in present day.
Yeah, he actually was named early in the book as, and had a couple of quotes attributed to him. When the story got a little deeper, he wasn't. He was just
Correct.
the senator.
The senator,
Right.
yeah.
But you kind of got the impression that that's who
Right.
it was.
Were those quotes real? Did he actually say that?
I can't imagine that they could have been made up. I
Yeah.
can't imagine that wouldn't have been a big problem if they hadn't been made up.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that certainly, those quotes certainly made this seem more plausible that he would be behind doing that. I also wonder, did this all make you more curious about the Japanese internment in World War II? Did you know about that? How much did you know about it?
Very much. In fact, I consulted one of our fellow writers in Indianapolis. I looked for a John Green crash course
Oh, nice.
to see if he had something on the internment, and he had a section on the home front during World War II.
Huh.
And the internment of the Japanese only got about 60 seconds of a 14-minute piece. I'm like, oh, why, now did it not hit your radar? But looking at that, that really helped me remember is the context of what else was happening in the culture at the same time, and that's where the comparison of the two breaks down just a bit. You know, at that time when the Japanese are being interned, as terrible as it is, there were 10 million American, mostly male, mostly white men who are drafted. There's another 6 million who volunteer. There's a huge migration of African Americans from the South to where the jobs are in the West and in the North. And so there's enormous things going on in the culture. And so 120,000 Japanese get interned. Of course, it's not getting much attention because all of these boys are going to war, and that's what we're going to notice first.
Yeah.
And I think what this did for me is isolating that internment, and without that of the rest of the war going on and such like, really helped me focus more on what it was about and the just unthinkableness of it. But as you both have said, could it happen again? Oh, sure. Given the right dominoes.
Well, it was just a convenient, with the terrorism that happened, and he never really got into that too much, which I think was very smart because it focuses more on the story, but everybody wants to blame somebody, and the Vietnamese acts of terrorism. It's not that much of a leap to just say, well, we don't know who's good and who's bad. Let's just get them all together and figure this out. That wasn't that much of a leap. And we have our bad guy, we put him away, and it's easy for Washington to spin that and justify it.
Especially because it was so specific. In 9/11, we had Largely, the terrorists had been trained in Saudi Arabia, but my goodness, there's so many million Muslim Americans, law-abiding and such like. So there's no way you're going to get your head around that. But with Vietnamese, it's like, oh, that's such a, there's one strip of earth that they come from. They're much more easy to identify. So it becomes much more convenient. We can find our boogeyman and eliminate this, in my opinion.
And I feel like that was maybe all exasperated by the fact that at the end we learned that the 7 terrorists who did this didn't even really give a reason. They said something about consumerism and Christmas time.
Right.
And so I feel like even if sadly in other terrorist attacks we've lived through, there has been a clear and explicit reason stated at the time of that terror for a lot of these attacks. But for this one, I think the fact that it was so nebulous also heightened the fear and just said, okay, like, round everyone up and we'll figure out, as Steve said, who's who, or who did what.
Yeah, and I think I think the Japanese internment is something that I felt kind of got glossed over in any sort of history that I ever
absolutely.
read about World War II. It was, we rounded up Japanese people and and then we let them go in a few years.
Right.
And without really thinking about what the conditions were like for them or why and how it happened. And in reading a little bit more just in the last few days, there was such general agreement that was a good thing to round up the Japs and put them in a camp.
And that was what, 44, 45?
42 or 43.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, pretty amazing. So, on another note, I don't know if it's just me who has this, but I think I've expressed in the past, sometimes it bugs me when these novels that look like mainstream novels are actually, science fiction that will never get shelved in the science fiction section. And the authors seem to have little understanding of, the vast world of genre science fiction. Did anyone else think of this as science fiction? Don't all answer at once.
I'll just say no, I didn't. If I had to classify this, science fiction probably wouldn't be it.
Yeah.
It probably.
It's revisionist history, is the
yeah,
closest
right?
thing I
Like
could
we
come
said,
to.
historical fiction.
Yeah,
I feel like I'd probably put it there.
And yet, that alternate history is a real science fiction trope.
Yeah.
It's a time-honored science fiction trope. It's funny. There was a post on Substack not too long ago by this writer who was talking about just that thing and that very thing. And I had made a comment on her post and said, that was disturbing to me. All of these, I can hardly look at a list of mainstream contemporary novels, but that they're all, some kind of weird science fictional thing going on with them. And she said, she thought it wasn't likely that there was a pipeline from Emily St. John Mandel to Clifford D. Simek. And I think that was probably right. These books are not going to really inspire anyone to get into those classics of science fiction, and I sort of mourn that. But but that's just. I think that's just me.
Here, we talk a lot about science fiction.
Yeah.
When we
right.
do these.
Well, let's talk about the characters. More than one of you has expressed hatred for Ursula. Let's someone say more about that.
I mean, I feel like Ursula, the character, carried the burden of all of the critique of investigative journalism in the news media, right? Like, on one hand, did Ursula's reporting end up getting the detainment camps shut down? Because things reached an escalation point with the tower once the story broke and once the sources were exposed. And then after a year after that, the detainment camps were done for. So did Ursula's reporting do that? Maybe, right? But it wasn't Ursula's reporting. It was Jen's reporting the whole time.
Yeah.
That Ursula just took credit for and was popping bottles of champagne at work. And
right. Yeah.
And they were the only thing, I truly don't believe that Ursula's organization, Top News or Top
Top
Story,
story.
I don't think Top Story cared. I think they wanted a Pulitzer Prize, and that was it. I think that was all that Roscoe wanted, was they wanted to be a New York Times or a Washington Post. I truly don't think they cared about what was happening to these people at these camps.
Was she just oblivious as to how her reporting could affect Jen or Duncan or Ma?
I think she knew. I do think she knew.
And just didn't care.
And she expressed some guilt. I think she's stuck in she's like anyone else. She has to make a living. She has to do something. Like the guard said, everything in this world will drive you crazy. So I think the way that she saw it, she's like, I want to be a reporter. She wants to get out of entertainment and writing like BuzzFeed, quiz articles, and wanted to do big news. And this was her chance. So she took it. And it's like, put in her position, a lot of us might do that, right? Especially because she has to have a job. She has to make a living. She has to earn money. So it's this, and then she can feel like she's doing some good, or it's something else that is probably problematic in another way if you look closely enough. So I think that she felt some guilt about it, and I think she expressed that in a few passages. That being said, I still don't like her.
Yeah, she's a tough one.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Well, I mean, she was appropriating the race, right? She identified as Vietnamese when it became convenient for her.
Precisely.
She appropriated these stories, and I'm sure she could rationalize doing that, in her relationship with Jen to get the word out. But I don't think her heart was in it to share that story as much as it was to, have her own star on the rise.
Yeah, there were a couple of mentions of like her story being at the top of the leaderboard. And I can remember some years ago walking into the Indianapolis Star office and seeing all the television screens that had all the page views and all the likes and everything for all their stories. And it was like, oh my gosh, that is what really matters in the newsroom, is how many people are clicking on your story and liking your story.
And Roscoe said it didn't, but it did matter. He was like, oh, the screens don't matter, but clearly it mattered.
Right, but don't you want to be on the top of the screen?
Yeah, and I think you mentioned in one of your questions, Ken, was at the end after Jen is released and she puts together her notes in a memoir and tries to get those published, and there aren't any takers because there's not enough drama in it. Jen is always, although we've been talking about Ursula, her half sister, always has a heart for the humanity in a situation. So she's talking to Hugo, and she's the one trying to give him advice on what gift to buy his wife for an anniversary or whatever, and wants to write a story about that. She's always looking for that. And at the end of the day, what's going to sell and what we want is about the terrible aspects of this thing. Yeah. So Ursula's story, again, her memoir takes off, and all, in my opinion, all at the expense of again, just like at the very beginning, telling mostly the story, but not all of it. But it was really good. It really tasted great, so it was easy to sell.
Yeah, life in the camps, as portrayed here, was I do think it was interesting that we didn't get a real deep look at life in the camps. We saw what was happening to Jen, and we saw what was happening to Duncan, but insofar as how everyone lived in the camp, we didn't get a lot of detail.
Right. And for Jen, at one point, she slips up and calls it home in front of Duncan, and Duncan gets mad at her about it.
Yeah.
It's like, what are you talking about? So there's varying degrees of community and varying degrees of getting on with life that goes on in the camps that frankly didn't sell very well.
So did anything in particular strike you about life in the camp, Steve? Anything that kind of stuck out to you as surprising or interesting about life in the camps?
I think just how quickly they assimilated. Given a bad situation, people are going to make the best of it. There was that whole undercurrent black market where people could basically get anything they wanted. all the creature comforts of home were basically there.
Yeah.
They're playing football on Friday nights. They've got movie nights. They're making documentaries or plays and things like that. So there was a whole subculture within the confines of the camp. But I think, and we kind of touched on it a little bit, that the truth of that was very kind of fungible, and it depended on who was speaking or writing as to what the truth was. And I don't know if that was part of the design to just shine a light onto that.
Hmm. Yeah, that actually, that network, El Paquete, was based on a real like network from Cuba of like underground culture that got passed around Cuba. When they didn't have, I mean, it was like,
Yeah, and that was all
the
news to
internet,
me.
a hand-to-hand internet.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think those different publications were all interesting too. There was the Camp Tacoma Loyalty, which was the house organ that Jen and Allegra worked for.
Yeah.
That was just kind of like the rah, supposed to be the publication, right?
Yeah.
Right.
It was like
for the propaganda.
Like
Right.
Top Stories Entertainment
Yeah.
Right.
department. Yeah.
It was supposed to, help build morale in the camp.
Yeah.
Right.
But then there was Korematsu, which was the kind of the underground, here's what's really going on. And then there was the other one run by Dennis, which was all the, like rumors and
Yeah.
Right.
The
misinformation.
gossip rag,
Right.
basically.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It makes you wonder, are those kinds of things necessary? I mean, obviously, the one run by the camp is something they're going to do to try to keep people not hating every minute of where they are.
Right.
But the other two, I think, were really interesting.
As much as I wanted to hate Dennis and his magazine, which I don't remember the name of now,
Let's see what it was.
It was an odd name.
It was-
It was
yeah, it was
not
pronounce in your head.
Bao.
yeah,
Yeah.
and like I feel like those types of, and I feel like it's similar with Tom's Play, where it's like, because there was a critic at Tom's Play that said like, you didn't even cover anything about the detainment camps.
Right.
Like,
Right.
You promised us
Yeah.
a
and
story
then-
about the
Again,
detainment
where's
camps.
the
Yeah. And
where's
so-
the story we're looking for?
Yeah, and I think that is very sort of on point of like the people who are living this day in and day out need an escape. I think it's a survivalist tactic, honestly. Like you can only living an experience and having to turn around and reflect on that experience immediately is really hard to do. And I think that not bow the sort of gossip rag or like tabloid, I think that was the escape that people needed to feel normal and to keep moving. And I think Tom's Play was the best way that he could process what happened. He's 20 years old. He's a kid.
Right.
And so if he's 20 when he does this play, that means what? When he went into detainment, they were in for 3 years, or was it 2 years?
Yeah,
16
3
or
years.
17.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so he was a child.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
how is he supposed? And then you have probably an old white man yelling at him about, you didn't write about detainment. Why don't you write about detainment camps? Like,
Right.
he's a child.
Well, yeah, interesting that the two characters who were really there and tried to tell their story kind of got shut down
Yeah.
for
Shut down.
for trying to tell it.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like, no, give us the gritty details.
Yeah.
It's
Again,
like, we already
but-
lived it.
But we
Yeah.
love a good story. We love and we love
Exactly.
the story we want.
Yep.
We want
exactly.
to hear.
Yeah.
I think it's a huge indictment. I think of our own appetite for our perceived truths.
Yeah, and I felt a little bit that way about the football games as well. Even though, like, I mean, it sounded brutal, right? Like Duncan, who sounded terrifying in a nice way, terrifying in terms of like, I don't want to be the quarterback he's about to sack. But they even mentioned that like they were having these guys play full contact football in this state of the art Nike facility with really bad rundown equipment. And
Yeah.
it's like, whose entertainment is it? And then they wanted to do like a circuit, like you can go up against other, like it almost felt like the Chain Gang All Stars at a certain point.
Oh yeah. Right.
Yeah, and I was like, again, like whose entertainment is even the football games where these guys are putting their bodies on the line with pads that were probably worn out in the 70s? Or I don't know when this, or, yeah, either way, like it just felt like they were sort of being exploited and then having to turn around and reflect on their own experiences for the sake of someone else's story.
Yeah, so it's interesting to see how people behaved in the camp, too. I mean, there was the one person who made video games,
Yeah.
text-based video games, and her game was how to make soup.
I forgot about that. Yeah,
There was only one.
right.
There was only one correct way to make soup, and
Yeah.
you had to do it that way. But
Yeah.
people, and she said people hated her games, but they played them anyway
Yeah.
because she was the only one making games. People were hung up on their TV shows that they got, bootlegged to them. They all watched Jurassic Park every week. It was the only movie they watched.
Yeah.
Or there were like three other one was Forrest Gump.
Forrest Gump.
And then
Right.
I can't remember. Yeah,
Yeah.
a couple of others. Yeah.
But people had their own ways to adjust to life in the camp, and then there were the people who kind of were on the more rebellious side. Allegra, Brandon, and Jen as well. Could you have done that kind of thing? Could you have been part of that kind of resistance if you were in that kind of camp? Anybody?
Probably in some way, yeah. I think the Korematsu thing that would have appealed to me, a way to say this truthfully, and we haven't mentioned that is named for the gentleman who challenged the Japanese internment,
Right.
whose case was dismissed by the Supreme Court in a very sad chapter. But it was a clever name for the resistance newspaper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think, Steve? Would you have been playing football, maybe?
Probably. I would have liked to think that I would have been a lead role in some of the resistance, but probably an escape would have been just as appealing.
Yeah.
Which are the traps that a lot of those people fell into. Duncan felt most happy, I think, just after he had showered and that moment before the dust started coating him. I remember
Good call.
something about him just discussing kind of his happiness.
Yeah, that was like what he liked most about playing football was getting
Yeah.
to take a good shower.
Yeah. And he even seemed to find his work in the kitchen as an escape too. Like, I feel like of all the characters, Duncan seemed the happiest.
Agreed.
Yeah.
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 Very much.
I also thought Duncan was a tragic character from the get-go.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't think Duncan was going to make it out.
No. He was the least developed character, in my opinion. Which I would have liked to know more about Duncan, but he was just like, I didn't see him getting out either.
Certainly, when the action scene happens at the end, and he's chasing down Dennis, you
knew.
kind of know what's going to happen.
Well, and we had the foreshadowing with people kind of rushing the guard shack to commit suicide by cop, basically.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
That was a kind of a weekly thing there for a while.
Yeah.
What other characters stood out? What other kind of minor characters stood out? I'll name one. Piper, who was she was the fellow. She was not an intern anymore.
Yeah.
She was the fellow at Top Story Entertainment.
Yeah.
Who wrote the piece, "These people are review bombing detention camps on Google Maps, and it's giving us life."
Yes.
Which infuriated Ursula.
That was
Right,
a moment
right.
where I was really proud of Ursula.
Right.
Yeah. I was really proud of her for marching down there and confronting her boss, Amelia.
Yeah.
I feel a little bit sorry. I mean, the fellow who wrote that, again, kids, like they don't have a judgment. I don't know why Amelia allowed that, because Amelia's the boss, right?
She was the boss of,
Why would
of
she allow that
entertainment.
to be published? The fellow, this Piper, she has to be, what, 19 or 20? She's
Yeah.
in college. She
Right.
doesn't know.
Right.
She's doing a little job for the summer.
Right.
But the fact that Amelia allowed her to go to print, like, I was proud of Ursula for standing up for, like, this is not funny. Like, this is maybe this would be funny in 30 years. And even then, maybe
Yeah.
not, right?
Yeah.
So I was proud of Ursula for standing up to, more so to Amelia than to Piper. But that was a really interesting, that was a really interesting dynamic and interaction.
Yeah, I don't think poor Piper deserved to be fired for that.
Yeah. Amelia
But-
should have been fired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was bad.
What did you all think of Dan?
One of the most infuriating parts of the book, in addition to all the things that Ursula did, was Alvin giving his dad all of his money.
All of his dough.
Yeah.
$10,000.
Yeah.
And then, especially because I truly don't think Dan appreciated it or cared. I don't have, like, there's a passage I highlighted that was really interesting to me where Dan said that he liked playing The Sims, and I felt attacked at first because I truly, honestly love playing The Sims as well. And so I was like, oh my God, The Sims. And so then he said, and it's because I can discard these people at will and just start over.
Yeah.
Just delete the game file and start from scratch. So he was like, he got this laptop and was like using it purely to play The Sims. He'd run the battery down, charge it up, play it again, charge it up, play it again. And in that moment, I had the thought, because at that point we didn't know yet that that was their dad. And I was like, this sounds like the dad. I still didn't put it together, but I was like, this sounds like the guy that abandoned his family.
Yeah, right.
But still in my mind, I didn't think that could be him. Yeah, I hated Dan. Like, I was hoping that when he was like found outside of the place and Alvin took him in, that he would want to be there for his family, but he turned himself in after he got the $10,000. Like, you couldn't have done that before you took Alvin's money.
Yeah.
And then
Like he
came
bought
back,
some gas or something, and that was it. And then and that was it.
got in his Land Cruiser and kept moving.
Yeah.
But hit it.
Yeah.
So it was there later. I mean, he still got the dough later.
Yeah,
you know?
he did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Still took Alvin's money.
Right.
Yeah.
He was like the cockroach that survives a nuclear war, right? Like
Yeah, he was.
self-preservation is the key, and he had a completely flat character arc. Like he was
Right.
he was exactly, he ended up exactly who he started, and we
Yeah.
had no surprises. And maybe our only surprise was that he didn't do anything surprising and become a better father or look at this as a second chance
Yeah.
Yeah.
to
Interesting.
reconnect.
Which
Yeah.
was a little frustrating to me because I wanted to know something about, well, what's beneath that? You cannot commit to any of this, and none of this is worth it to you. Why is? I mean, what's fed that? Where does that come
Well,
from? But we got
Commitment
nothing
issues.
there.
But he was
Yeah.
also the kid. He was also the baby who got on the boat
Oh,
with his
that's
mother
Yeah,
in
that's
the
right.
first chapter
But Mom was
to
still-
run away from
Yeah.
Vietnam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
I mean, that was,
And they
that
kept-
was kind of built into him.
They
Yeah.
kept asking him when he was in detention camp for a year. Didn't they keep interrogating him about like what trauma?
That very question.
Right.
What trauma
Yeah,
happened? And he was
yeah.
like, I don't have any trauma.
Right.
It's like, I think you do. I think you actually have a lot of trauma and you have severe commitment issues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
But he just didn't see it.
Yeah. Well, what did we think of Tom's play?
I loved it. I have a special place in my heart for bad theater. Like, I'm happy to sit there and watch a 2-hour production that's just not good. Like, something about it is just like entertaining, and you have to admire that, like, these people are putting themselves out there in the most, like, the playwright and the actors are putting themselves out there literally in front of, it's different than a bad movie where if it's a bad movie, at least, I'm not doing it live. I'm embarrassed, after the fact, but like, Tom was proud of what he did, and I had
Yeah.
a lot of respect for him. And the way that he stood up to that critic, that was like, I don't remember what the exchange was, but he sort of like was pretty snappy and sharp for a 20-year-old
Mhm.
at his first play and his first Q&A. I would see the play. I loved it. Did it make any sense? No. Like, fighting the space bugs. Like, I get it, and it does make sense. And I think it does very well describe what he experienced in the detainment camps, even if it wasn't what critics wanted to
And
see.
Jen thought so.
Yeah.
I mean, Jen thought it really captured the feeling of her experience.
Especially
in
the
camp.
time lapse.
Yes,
issue.
yeah,
Yeah.
the arrested development
Right.
they called it. And of course
Yeah.
Ursula was like, I don't like it. Like,
Right.
Ursula, no one
Right.
asked you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, of course she wouldn't have liked it.
Yeah.
I mean, she wouldn't have been able to understand it. And you know, the piece that I walked away with is the fact that you can have art out of just an awful situation,
Mm.
and that they were still creative during this, and that was maybe their outlet. Other, you know, Duncan got into football, and that energy has to go somewhere, and that was kind of the biggest piece and hope that I recognized, is that even out of something awful, something good can emerge, even if it's not appreciated.
I was a little impatient with it. I was like, "What? Okay, fine, we'll go through this part."
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I was ready to get back to the other character.
It felt really out of left field, I will
Yeah.
say. The placement of it,
Yeah.
like the first time I actually skimmed over it, and then I was like, hold on, I think that was important. So I had to, because it just felt like an interruption.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and I was like, I don't care about the family barbecue and Tom's story. And then I was like, wait a minute, I actually think that I need to read that closer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also I think it was interesting that Ursula also noted that more family came to see Tom's play than went to her book release party.
Interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
Even though she was, you know, going to work for the New York Times now, she'd fulfilled all her dreams.
Just
Of course she
everybody
felt
off.
that
They
way.
go to see
Right.
Tom's play.
Nobody likes it.
Charlie in space.
She's
More
her
important.
father's daughter.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Boy, we're
Yeah.
really hard on Ursula. in
Yeah,
this.
sorry,
Yeah.
Ursula. She
Well,
had
Yeah.
some moments.
You know,
Yeah. What? Speaking of which, how about the kind of the sexual assault episode with Ursula? Did that do anything for the story?
I was really eager to get your take on that.
I mean, not real. First of all, I was upset that like this made me so mad. She got the day wrong. If
Right.
it weren't for Tyler literally calling her and being like, "Hey, are you coming?" Which, as her source, he didn't have to do that. She messed up. Like, she has a story that was handed to her and she still messed up. Anyways, that made me mad. But I was surprised by how forthcoming Tyler was. And I was surprised that he tried to get into her room. Unless I misread it, there wasn't actually like a sexual assault.
No,
Right.
he never
like-
got in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like that was maybe a play to drum up some sympathy for her, but I wasn't affected by it. I was like, okay, I'm sure that you're rattled by that, Ursula, but imagine how rattled everyone else feels like after what you've done, which maybe is not very sympathetic of me.
Yeah, I wondered what when I read that part, because it isn't seemingly unaffected by it.
Yeah.
And I'm later asking myself, well, why did he even include that?
Yeah.
Unless it was just making the point that you cannot tiptoe into that kind of underworld without putting yourself at some kind of risk.
Oh, true.
I suppose
Yeah.
maybe that's the point. I'm not really sure.
A lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Maybe just a little taste of what everyone else was going through. But
Right.
You're
Yeah.
right that it was kind of out of left field, and it just kind of reminded me that just women, and we don't have to deal with this,
Right.
but you've always got to be hyper vigilant
Right.
on this
Yeah.
stuff, and bad things can happen at any time. But it didn't really jive with what was going on, other than I think we're trying to reach here for some sort of connection.
Right.
But I didn't see, everything should have a purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't see how that really played into the overall narrative.
Yeah, I didn't
Yeah.
really either, except
Yeah.
maybe as Christine suggested, maybe it was a little bit of a play for a little bit of sympathy for Ursula. I'm not sure
Yeah.
it worked. How about the tower, Tim? What was the symbolism of the tower, do you think?
The omnipresence of the surveillance state, whether real or perceived, it seemed like in the end the tower was more of a visual threat than it was anything else.
Yeah, it was a signal blocker.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was a signal,
yeah.
but that could have been done by a much smaller device,
Right.
and much more easily done. So I always kind of took it as sort of a visual threat, as a visual reminder of being under surveillance. I was kind of nonplussed by
Yeah.
it. The rest of you folks.
same. I mean, it didn't really have any effect because they got everything into camp that they needed. I mean, they were watching all their shows that they wanted, and it wasn't really much of a deterrent. But it was that reminder, I suppose, of the control that they are under.
Yeah, they were. It was interesting that they thought it was making them impotent,
Yeah.
and I guess
Right.
in a way it kind of was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I felt like it was an intimidation tactic and
Mhm.
something to like hyperfixate on of like what is this thing doing? And I think the literal purpose of it, of course, was jamming like an electricity fog or electric fog.
Yeah.
I think that though was more for the guards. I don't think they
Oh.
wanted. That was my thought. I didn't
Yeah,
because like at
interesting.
one point the guard pulled out his
Fair.
phone. I don't think they wanted the guards posting pictures and images and Snapchats and TikToks
wow.
from detainment camp.
Didn't go
Yeah.
there, but
Because like there's no one has a phone, so
Right.
the only people that have phones are the guards. So
Right.
if that's actually the purpose of the tower, then it has to be for the people who would have those devices.
Yeah,
Because
interesting.
everyone that got things from El Paquete, they were just like watching it on thumb drives, not internet connected devices.
Yeah.
So it still worked. It sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the ending. How do we feel about where everybody ended up?
I was really proud of Jen. She was, I think, in this book, she was my favorite character. I think that she showed really tremendous growth for someone so young. And I think it took so much courage for her to just get in her Honda Accord and go.
Yeah.
At a certain point, I think one of the last lines of the book, she says she takes off her USB drive and puts it with the title in the glove box with the title and registration for her Honda. She was like, that's all she has in the world. That's everything that Jen owns. And she seemed content and happy with that. The only thing that made me nervous for her ending was she was driving south. And I think Dan was also headed south. And I was like, please don't run into Dan because he'll take your Honda Accord from you too. So like, I loved the ending of this book. And I don't often love endings. I was even okay with Duncan's death. Like, I think that made sense. And I think Duncan's death aged Jen a lot. And I think part of the reason I ended up liking Jen and how mature she was because she watched her kid brother die, you know, and like, I think that, and what happened with Allegra, which she never even got closure on what happened.
Yeah.
So she could have lost two friends, or a family member and a friend in camp.
Mm-hmm.
So I was happy with the ending. I loved where Jen ended up. She's the character that sticks with me the most. Alvin, who we haven't talked about, was kind of forgettable, besides like the flub of like, why would he think he could release Google documents and
Right.
no
Yeah,
one would.
that was a bad idea.
Yeah.
But he
He got
ended
another
up
job.
fine though,
Yeah,
right?
he got another
he
job.
was skilled.
He's just
Yeah.
$10,000 poorer. Yeah.
Ursula got everything she wanted, but it all seemed kind of hollow.
Yeah.
But Alvin he didn't go through the trauma that Duncan and Jen went through.
No,
No.
he didn't.
So the whole thing was a little bit more peripheral to him. He also didn't, except for the Google mistake, he wasn't living it day to day the way Ursula was through
Yeah.
Jen.
True.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um,
He read the documents,
I
but
guess
that was
that's
about
true.
it.
I guess
yeah.
that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
So no one felt hopeful that Dan was going to find Jen. I thought maybe that was a
I
tip of the hat that
I was
maybe
hoping
he
he
could
wouldn't.
change and
yeah.
I wondered
he was
that.
going to go try
yeah.
to find her.
I kind of thought
Maybe.
the same thing, Steve.
Yeah.
That maybe there was going to be some connection there. What she was doing was so like what he had done.
And I think that the dad in me, I felt sorry for Jen. I wasn't proud of her. I was like, oh dear Jesus, what's she doing? You know, because I just thought of the perils of what could be in store for her, and
Yeah.
I felt my reading of Jen's character is that she's depleted at the end. My reading of it is that Ursula has taken her for all she has to the final point where Jen gets so upset when Ursula says at her TED Talk, well, and I lost a brother,
Oh, yeah.
and Jen shrieks, and I'm like, not even that is sacred to Ursula. She will take everything Jen has
Yeah.
to use for her own advantage.
Yeah.
To where Jen ends up with nothing. She's got her thumb drive
And her Honda.
and her Honda,
Yeah.
and I'm actually surprised she has any relationship with Ursula at all after
Yeah,
after
same.
the TED Talk.
Well, maybe she doesn't. I mean, she got in that car and left. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, we don't have a lot of time left, but let's talk about whether we would recommend it or not. Steve?
Yes, I
Yes.
would. I
Yeah.
liked it. Yeah.
Yeah. Tim, what do you think?
I found it. I was more interested in it than liked it. I'm a split decision. It's very interesting. Um, uh, it wasn't. I was interested more than liked it.
Yeah.
That's the only way
Yeah,
I could say.
that's fair.
Yeah.
Christine?
Yeah, I liked it. I maybe loved it. There were parts of it I loved, but I definitely liked it, and I would definitely recommend it.
Yeah, I think I would too. I enjoyed reading it and thought it was thought-provoking.
It's very well written.
Yeah.
I thought
Yeah.
this, yeah.
Understated, not
Language
flashy,
was
but
terrific.
yeah, really good. Well, speaking of good, who has a recommendation of something else they would like for our listeners to know about? Christine, you have something?
Yeah, I have two actually. The first is a book of short stories I read a while ago that I just keep thinking about. Tomb Sweeping by Alexander Chang. Very much about sort of the Asian experience and being perceived as Asian or not Asian and just how Asian you are. Really interesting. It's a collection of short stories where some are more successful than others, but as a whole, it's a book that I think about a lot. And then also just always fascinated by the idea of passing as something that you're not. So I'd recommend The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett.
Oh,
Huge
great.
book that came out a while ago. It's one of the big books that got a lot of hype that, in my opinion, lives up to the hype. So if you
Awesome.
haven't read Vanishing Half, really, really good.
Yeah, great recommendations. Thanks, Christine. Tim?
Well, I'm always catching up with what I should have read in college. But more recent things, poetry collection, Every Riven Thing by Christian Wyman is on my bedside table, and I'm consulting that almost daily. Another book now 25, 30 years old, From Beirut to Jerusalem, Thomas Friedman. If you want to put the Mideast in some kind of context, it's really helpful, though it's a bit encyclopedic. And then for fun, Ken reintroduced me to The Quiet American by Graham Greene recently. I'd forgotten how good that, what a writer he was.
Speaking of Vietnam.
And, yeah, and that was just a beautiful thing for entertainment
Yeah,
recently.
yeah. Thanks, Tim. Great.
I was thinking kind of a companion piece to this is a book called Yellowface.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of about that appropriation. But I read a book called The God in the Woods, which is it's maybe 450 pages. I'm not a fast reader.
Oh, I read
and
by
read
Liz
that in
Moore.
2 days.
Yeah, that was
At the end of
really
vacation,
good.
I was
Yeah.
like pouring through it,
Huh.
and it's one of those books that you just find yourself thinking about. It's not like a super deep read,
Yeah.
but it was very, very entertaining. So if you're going on vacation, I would take that copy.
Yeah, great recommendation. Thanks, Steve. Well, I had a whole nother recommendation planned for the show, and then I started thinking about the idea that Me Documents was probably not going to be the gateway to great science fiction, but that doesn't mean you don't try. So alternate history is definitely an old science fiction staple. One of the classics of the genre is Ward Moore's Bring the Jubilee from 1953, mixes time travel with a world in which the South won the Civil War. But the one I really want to recommend is a novel from 1962, and it's a book that author said was inspired by Bring the Jubilee, and that is Philip K. Dick's The Man in the High Castle. It's set in an America partitioned between Germany and Japan, 15 years after the Axis has won World War II. Typical Dick fashion, the mysterious man in the high castle is the author of a novel within a novel called The Grasshopper Lies Heavy, in which the Allied powers won the war. It's often the case with Dick novels. The reality becomes sort of like an acid trip, and it's probably as confusing for the characters as it is for the reader. But The Man in the High Castle is really a great work of alternate history, and it's science fiction. You can find it on the science fiction shelves at your library. So maybe this is a gateway to more Philip K. Dick. Maybe Clifford D. Simic, if that ever happens. And that's it for us this month. Remember, you can stream Radio Free Book Club practically anywhere you get your podcasts. Find notes for this and all of our shows on our Radio Free Book Club Substack, which we hope you'll consider subscribing. For Christine Hudson, Tim Taylor, Steve Woods, and all the members of Radio Free Book Club, I'm Ken Honeywell. Thanks for listening, and join us next time when we'll be breaking down the latest novel from Jess Walter called So Far Gone. We hope you'll be along for the ride. Until then, read a book.